Good morning. Welcome to another art lesson. We've been looking at different ways of making art, and mostly drawings, that is. And we've looked at some of the techniques that artists employ in doing their work. And in today's lesson, we are looking at perspective. You may be asking yourself, what is perspective? In simple English, perspective is simply a point of view. And when applied to art, perspective is simply a system that artists use to create a three-dimensional effect on a two-dimensional surface. Or you could say perspective is a system that artists use to create an illusion of depth or distance on a flat surface. Now, perspective is all about creating depth on a flat surface. The thing is, the world that we live in is three-dimensional, meaning that it has the objects that we see around have height, have length, and have width. Take a look at this eraser. So you find that there's height, there's the length, and there's also the width. And that's how we see things in the real world. So when we are looking at perspective, we are trying to make a representation of three-dimensional things that we see in the real world on this flat surface by creating an illusion of distance. We need to create those distances that I mentioned about the eraser. Okay, so having known what perspective is and what perspective does to a work of art, there are about four main types of perspective. The first one is known as linear perspective. Okay, the other one is called aerial perspective. The third one is called overlapping perspective. And the last one is foreshortening. So these are the four main types of perspective that artists use whenever they want to create an illusion of space or distance on their work. Now, our focus in today's lesson is on linear perspective, and at a later stage, we'll look at the other types of perspective. Now, with linear perspective, this is a perspective that uses lines to give an illusion of space or distance. So just as the name suggests, so you have lines, parallel lines being used to create an illusion of distance, that is. So let's look at linear perspective. So under linear perspective, you have three types of linear perspective. So there's what is known as one-point perspective. There's also what is known as two-point perspective. There's also what is known as three-point perspective. So this is what you have under linear perspective. So each one of them has its own use. It's ideal for particular compositions. Okay, so let's take a look at how you make use of linear perspective. And to help us do that, we'll look at one-point perspective. So our focus in today's lesson will be on one-point perspective. So to help you work on linear perspective, there are certain features that have to be put in place, or there are features that you make use of through the process of working on linear perspective. So the features that you get to find in linear perspective, there is what is known as a horizon. So whenever you're working on linear perspective, you make use of the horizon. There's also what is known as the vanishing point. Okay. Then you have you also have a surface where this work is being done. So the surface is known as the picture plane. So let's start our work with these three things that are used in linear perspective. So a horizon is simply a horizontal line that is drawn across the picture plane. And this line separates the sky from the ground. And it's an imaginary line, by the way. Then you have the vanishing point, okay? The vanishing point, this is a point where the parallel perspective lines appear to meet. Of course, you know that when lines are parallel, they don't get to meet. But in perspective, you make use of parallel lines that appear to meet because of distance, okay? So let's get started. For this particular work, I have this piece of paper here, okay? So this will work as my picture plane. My composition will be done on this space, okay? So like I had mentioned, that in perspective drawing, the first feature that you put in place is a line known as the horizon. So on this picture plane, I'll draw that horizon here, that horizontal line here. So my horizon will start from there, and it will be straight to about this point. So because of what I'm working on, I've decided to position my horizon somewhere in the center. And by the way, one-point perspective is ideal when you're making a composition of things like a straight road, and you want to show distance or depth of that road. It's ideal when you're working on an interior of a building, a tunnel, a rail line, such things. So one-point perspective would be ideal for that. So the horizon has been placed. So this is the horizon. This is the horizon. So the next feature that I'll put in place is what is known as the vanishing point. So the vanishing point is very important in perspective. It is this point that helps us to create that illusion of space that we very much need in perspective, okay? So depending on your composition and on how you want your work to be viewed, you could position your vanishing point anywhere. So for this work, I'll try to position it somewhere in the center. So that's the vanishing point. So this will give me the distance that I need, meaning that all the lines that I'm going to use in my perspective drawing will be converging here. All the lines will be meeting at this particular point. So let's take, for example, we are working on a straight road. Where do we start from? Horizon in place. The vanishing point is in place. And the next step that I'll work on, I want to work on the two ends of the road because I'm working on a straight road. So I'll start by working on the two ends of the road, the edges. I need to show those edges. So let's work on those edges, the two ends of the road. So this is the straight road that I'm working on, and I want to show distance on this flat surface here. So what I'll do, I'll draw two lines because it's a road that I'm working on. So I'll draw a line showing the edge of the road. So the line that I'll draw here will show the edge of the road, and this line will go to the vanishing point that is here, okay? So let me use a ruler for this. So I'll have this placed here. So I have this line drawn, and it's going to that vanishing point there. So the left edge of the road has been done. I'm remaining with the right edge of the road. So I'll do a similar thing. I'll have a line drawn, and this line will go and meet the other line at the vanishing point. So the first part is done. Okay. So already there's a bit of distance in this. Now imagine this road has some markings, some road markings, okay? So what I'll do, I need to work on those road markings. So I'll decide on the thickness. Remember we said in linear perspective you use lines to show distance. So the road markings will have lines that will go and meet the other lines at this same vanishing point. So one point perspective uses one vanishing point, okay? So I'll have this edge. Let me just push it a bit. I'll have this edge drawn like that. So this is the left end of the road markings. I'll put another one on the right side. The lines will go and converge at the vanishing point. So I have something like this. So visually already this gives us an illusion of distance. So if it's a broken line, meaning that I have to create a bit of spaces by drawing short horizontal lines. So let's see what we can come up with. So I have something like this. I could use a ruler if I want, but I've just done it using freehand. So since it's a broken line, I'll erase the lines that appear in between the breaking. Okay, so I'll have something like this. Because of the lines that go and meet at the vanishing point, this view or this composition takes me inside, and that's a distance that has to be seen in a work of art that is done on a flat surface. Okay, so I'm sure you can see how perspective works on this one. So this is a road, and I have that going back in distance. So let's also imagine that this road had a few features on the sides. It's not on its own. Imagine it had trees. So what I'll do, I'll draw a line just to help me mark the point where all the trees are going to start from. Okay, so this line is where all the trees will be starting from. This is the ground where all the trees are starting from. And this line will be drawn going to the vanishing point that is on the horizon. Okay, so this is the beginning. Then I'll also decide on how high should these trees be. Imagine there are several trees on the side of the road. So I'll draw another line moving that way, and it's all going to the vanishing point there. Okay, so this gives me the distance. Okay, the height of the trees, that is. So if I have to put trees here, imagine these trees are of the same height. I know it's not normal to have the same height, but for the sake of understanding perspective, we'll do this. So imagine there is this tree here. Okay, I'm just trying to make it more natural. And by the way, whenever you're working on perspective and you're drawing these perspective lines, the parallel lines that are being used, make sure they are very faint. Perspective lines are simply there to guide you through the process, and they should never be very dark. At some point, you may be required to erase them. So there's the first tree there. I'll move to the next one. I'll fix it there. The third one, okay, let me just work out this. The third one is coming there. I can keep on moving, but I'm maintaining the distance because this perspective line is guiding me on where to end. Okay, so I have the other one, And I can keep on going, because already this gives you the distance that you need to see in a work of art. Okay, so works of art should have distance, should have depth. The distance that makes your eye move from the front to the back. Okay, that's what makes artwork interesting. So we have something like this. So for perspective, every feature that you want to include in your composition, it should have perspective lines that go and meet the other lines on the vanishing point. Okay, so this point here is called the vanishing point, by the way. Vanishing point. Okay. So if there are more features coming, if I want to put houses or street lights on the other side, I'll still go through the same process. I'll mark where the street lights are going to start from. I'll draw that line where the street lights are coming from. Or the street lights may start from here. Or if there's a walkway, you are going to use this as a walkway. Okay, so let's say there are street lights coming on this other side. So I've marked the beginning with that perspective line that is going to the vanishing point. Then I'll also draw a line where all the street lights are ending in terms of height. Okay, so that has been done. So if imagine this is a street light. So you have a vertical line there, another vertical line there, another vertical line there, then you have more vertical lines. So the principle of perspective is that things tend to reduce in size as the distance increases. Okay, so if these were power lines, so it would be something like this. Okay, so I'll end here. I hope you've gotten an idea of how perspective works. So this is a simple composition of what I've been trying to come up with. Okay, so there's much more that you can actually do. You can refine your work. You can explore other ways of doing these things. You can add more features. Now, when you're finally done with your work, perspective lines have to be erased. And that's the reason why the lines have to be faint. So I can erase that line. I can also erase that line. I don't need it anymore. I can erase this one. I don't need it anymore. But you still need the horizon. The horizon is part of the composition because we get to see this imaginary line anyway. So I can just simply make it a bit natural. Imagine there's a bit of foliage in the background and you have all that. Okay, so this is a simple one-point perspective. Thank you so much. So what I want you to work on, just see how you can make a composition that uses one-point perspective. Thank you so much. Until next time.